Will the Middle East conflict lead to a global economic recession? A full-scale conflict in the oil-rich region could drive energy prices up dramatically, triggering a chain reaction. More than a year has passed since the tragic attacks by Palestinian groups on Israel on October 7. During this time, the conflict has significantly expanded, affecting not only Israel and Gaza but also neighboring countries, particularly Iran. Ground operations, attacks on civilian infrastructure, and prolonged military activities, including direct exchanges between Iran and Israel, have worsened the humanitarian situation in the region. The international community has repeatedly tried to mediate the conflict, but peace talks have so far yielded no meaningful results. The conflict has also heightened political tensions, drawing more neighboring countries into the fray and raising the risk of a wider international crisis. The economic fallout has become apparent not only for Israel but also for global markets. Expectations of rising oil prices due to regional instability have continued to grow, exacerbating inflationary pressures on the global economy. In Israel, GDP growth has slowed significantly, and investors are cautious about engaging in new projects, not only domestically but throughout the region. The Israeli central bank's forecast of an economic downturn has proven accurate. Domestic economic activity has declined, foreign investment has stalled, and inflation has surged due to a sharp rise in oil prices. As the world anxiously watches the unfolding events, analysts predict three possible future scenarios. The most dangerous involves a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran, which could lead to a global recession and push oil prices to $150 per barrel. However, more likely scenarios involve the conflict remaining within Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, which would still result in significant oil price increases and additional strain on the global economy. Israel's economy is facing one of its most challenging tests in recent years. The country is experiencing the sharpest downturn among the wealthiest nations of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. Amid these challenges, Israel's economy was further impacted by a nationwide strike on September 1, which nearly halted economic activity due to widespread dissatisfaction with the government's handling of the war. Although Israel's economic troubles cannot compare to the devastation in Gaza, the prolonged conflict continues to damage the nation's finances, reduce business investment, and erode consumer confidence. Before the war, Israel's economy was growing rapidly, primarily driven by the tech sector. In 2021, per capita GDP grew by 6.8%. And in 2022, it grew by 4.8%. Far outpacing most Western countries. Israel's economic indicators for the second quarter of 2024 are alarming. GDP during the April to June period grew by only 1.2% year-over-year, down 1.4% from the previous quarter. This result is far below economists' expectations, who had forecast growth between 2.3% and 5%. Adjusted for population growth, per capita GDP fell by 0.4% in the second quarter, signaling a slowdown in economic growth as the ongoing war continues to severely impact exports and investment. Ronen Munekim, chief economist at Mizrahi Tefahot Bank, noted that the decline in per capita GDP compared to both the previous quarter and the same period last year is a clear sign of the significant damage the prolonged conflict has inflicted on Israel's economy. Additionally, in the second quarter, business output fell by 1.9%, while goods and services exports dropped by 8.3%. However, amid these negative indicators, private consumption, a key driver of economic activity, increased by 12% in the second quarter, following a strong 23.5% increase in the previous quarter. The war has also had a severe impact on specific sectors of Israel's economy. The construction industry slowed by nearly one-third in the first 2 months of the conflict, while agricultural output fell by a quarter in some areas. Approximately 360,000 reservists were mobilized at the start of the war, though many have since returned home. More than 120,000 Israelis have been forced to leave their homes in border areas, and 140,000 Palestinian workers from the West Bank have been barred from entering Israel following the October attacks. To address labor shortages, the Israeli government is recruiting workers from India and Sri Lanka. However, a significant number of positions remain unfilled. It is estimated that up to 60,000 Israeli companies could shut down by 2024 due to a lack of personnel, supply chain disruptions, and a decline in business confidence, with many companies postponing the launch of new projects. Although tourism is not a major sector of Israel's economy, it has also been affected. Tourist numbers have plummeted since the war began, and 1 in 10 hotels in the country is at risk of closure. Meanwhile, Israel's economic growth forecast has worsened. In July, the Bank of Israel revised its expectations, lowering its growth forecast to 1.5% for 2024, down from the previous estimate of 2.8%. Given the ongoing hostilities in Gaza and escalating conflict with Hezbollah along the Lebanese border, the Bank of Israel estimates that the total cost of the war could reach $67 billion by 2025. Even with a $14.5 billion military aid package from the United States, Israel's economy may struggle to cope with these costs. This situation requires complex decisions regarding resource allocation. Funding for certain sectors of the economy may need to be cut or borrowing increased. However, higher debt levels would lead to increased debt service payments and higher future costs. The deteriorating financial situation has also led to a downgrade of Israel's credit rating. In August 2024, Fitch Ratings downgraded the country from A+ to A, citing increased military spending, which has pushed the budget deficit to 7.8% of GDP in 2024, up from 4.1% the previous year. This could jeopardize Israel's ability to sustain its current military strategy, which requires substantial financial resources for operations in Gaza, including the use of advanced weaponry and logistical support. Economic activity in Gaza has virtually come to a halt. Trade has stopped, and many Palestinians now rely on humanitarian aid. Meanwhile, vital communication channels have been cut off, and critical infrastructure has been destroyed due to ongoing fighting and bombing. The effects of the war have spread far beyond Israel and Palestine. In April, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, predicted weak economic growth for the Middle East in 2024, only 2.6%. The main reasons cited were instability stemming from the conflict in Gaza and the threat of the conflict escalating into a broader regional crisis. This is not the first time violence in Gaza has affected the global economy. For example, Israel's bombing of Gaza in 2008 caused oil prices to rise by nearly 8%, raising concerns in global markets. The Middle East conflict, particularly between Israel and Iran, could have severe consequences for global energy markets. One of the most vulnerable points in this geopolitical tension is Iran's oil infrastructure. In the event of Israeli attacks on Iran's oil facilities, prices could skyrocket above $100 per barrel. Iran currently produces over 3 million barrels of oil per day, exporting about half of this, primarily to China. Thus, any reduction in exports would create a supply shortage in the global market, inevitably driving prices higher. Attacks on critical oil infrastructure, such as the main export terminal on Karg Island, pose a significant threat to the market. This terminal plays a crucial strategic role in Iran's oil exports. And its shutdown could substantially reduce supply, worsening the global shortage and causing chaos in the market. Notably, in the context of heightened global tensions, other exporting countries may not be able to compensate for the losses in time, exacerbating supply-demand issues for energy resources. Furthermore, the possibility of Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world's oil supply passes, could have catastrophic consequences for the global economy. This strait is a critical oil transportation corridor from Persian Gulf countries, and its closure would lead to shortages not only of Iranian oil but also of Saudi, Kuwaiti, Emirati, and other key oil producer supplies. It is important to consider that the impact of an attack on Israel's oil infrastructure may be limited, as Israel is not a major player in the global oil market. However, the political and military consequences could be significant. The threat of a full-scale regional conflict would contribute to prolonged instability, not only in the energy sector but also in global financial markets. The situation is further complicated by the political interests of other global players. The United States, on the brink of a presidential election, will seek to stabilize the global economy and avoid oil price spikes, as price increases could lead to inflation and pressure on domestic markets. As a result, the U.S. administration may seek to de-escalate tensions in the region, possibly through diplomatic channels and increased oversight of the situation. The impact of this conflict on energy markets will depend directly on how far Iran and Israel are willing to carry out their threats. If the confrontation escalates into actual attacks on critical energy infrastructure, the world could face significant turmoil in energy markets, potentially leading to long-term consequences for the global economy, including sharp fuel price increases and supply chain disruptions. The conflict in the Middle East, particularly between Israel and Iran, poses a serious threat not only to the oil market but also to the gas industry. Based on official statistics, it can be expected that an escalation in the situation could lead to significant volatility in energy markets, as the region plays a crucial role in the global energy system. According to the International Energy Agency, IEA, Iran produced around 256 billion cubic meters of natural gas in 2022, a significant portion of which is used for domestic consumption. However, Iran also exports gas to neighboring countries such as Turkey, Iraq, and Armenia. In the event of attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure or the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which is not only important for oil transportation but also for liquefied natural gas, LNG, exports, natural gas markets could experience shortages as well. For the global economy, such fluctuations can cause chain reactions. A sharp reduction in supply and potential disruptions in gas provision will lead to price increases for this energy resource, impacting importing countries, especially in Europe. According to Eurostat, in 2022, nearly 40% of the natural gas supplied to Europe came from Russia. However, following the sanctions imposed after the Ukraine crisis, many countries started looking for alternatives, including supplies from the Persian Gulf and the United States. If gas supplies from Iran are halted, this will exacerbate shortages in the European market, potentially leading to a new wave of energy crises in the winter months, when the demand for gas for heating increases significantly. Moreover, such events could hinder the implementation of LNG projects, both in the Persian Gulf region and other parts of the world. For example, Qatar, one of the largest LNG exporters, ships its gas through the Strait of Hormuz. Any disruption in this region will reduce LNG supply to the global market and increase gas prices in Asia and Europe. This will particularly affect countries facing energy resource shortages, such as Japan, South Korea, and China. At the same time, rising gas prices will impact industries, particularly those dependent on gas supplies, such as chemicals, fertilizers, metallurgy, and power generation. Higher energy costs will increase production costs, adding inflationary pressure to the global economy. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, global economic growth is projected to slow to 2.6% in 2024. And the energy crisis could further worsen this outlook. Rising energy prices will also contribute to inflation in the consumer segment. According to the OECD, global inflation reached 6.6% in 2023. And sharp increases in oil and gas prices could once again drive up the prices of essential goods and services, negatively impacting consumer purchasing power. The transportation sector will be under particularly heavy pressure, as fuel costs are a key factor in overall costs. Thus, the escalation of the conflict in the Middle East will have serious consequences for the oil and gas markets, leading to rising energy prices and inflation. The global economy will face new challenges that will require coordinated actions from key players to stabilize the situation and seek alternative energy supplies.